I'm Brian Van Osdol, founder of Alpine Patents. I've had the chance to help over 200 startups build and grow their patent portfolios over the last 15 years. The patent process can be challenging to navigate, and even more so when you're a small tech company trying to rapidly build transformative new technology. Today, we're going to cover the basics of patents, as well as strategies for how you, as a founder of a technology company, should approach them. We're going to start off reviewing the basics of patents, what a patent is, then move into strategy and why and how patents impact startups. And last, we'll quickly look at the patent process. My hope is that by the end of this discussion, you have some more intuition around the mechanics of the patent system and ways to leverage it for your company. Patents fall under the broader umbrella of intellectual property. IP protection can be categorized into four main areas: copyrights, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. The first two categories of IP, copyrights and trademarks, are less focused on protecting your underlying technology, though copyrights can come into play with software. Copyrights protect works of art, such as paintings and music, and trademarks safeguard your branding, such as logos, names, with the goal of preventing market confusion. Patents, the subject of this video, are all about protecting inventive technology. If you come up with a novel piece of technology, you can safeguard it using a patent by filing a patent application. Trade secrets deal with keeping valuable information closely guarded to prevent outsiders from accessing it. Trade secrets aren't limited to technology, but some types of technical insights or knowledge can strategically make sense to hold as a trade secret. The downside to trade secrets is it depends on you holding it as a secret and on others not independently figuring the same thing out. In some situations, a business will have to weigh the trade-offs of patents and trade secrets. If, however, what you're doing will be discoverable when you release it to the world, then patents probably make the most amount of sense. Within patents, there are actually three main types of patents. The type people commonly think of when they think of patents is called a utility patent. A utility patent protects the invention itself, the inventive concept of something, some system, process, or material. For example, a utility patent would have been used to protect the light bulb and the specific components that make it work. With the utility patent, you could have prevented others from making that light bulb with those same components, so protecting that concept. The next type of patent is called a design patent, which is used for protecting more of the industrial design of a product, the way it's shaped or formed, the ornamentation of the design. Iconic companies like Nike or Apple use these to prevent direct copies of the look and feel of a device. They would likely not be useful for those working in the hard sciences, though, where the value is not in the aesthetic design of the product, but the actual underlying technology. Last, there's another type of patent called a plant patent, which, as its name suggests, is a patent for protecting invented or discovered plants, not as useful for most hard tech companies. For the rest of this video, we're going to be focused solely on utility patents. So what specifically is a utility patent? Using its legal description, a utility patent grants you a limited time monopoly over a particular concept and the right to exclude others from making, using, distributing, or selling your claimed invention. The important thing to notice is this is a right to exclude. To most people, this is confusing. If you invented something and you patented it, then you should be able to make your invention. However, because of the difference between patentability and infringement, it doesn't work exactly like that. This is surprising to many, and we'll touch on this in a little bit when we discuss the parts of the patent. But for now, just know that a patent doesn't necessarily give you the right to make and do what you invented, but it does allow you to exclude others from doing it. Another important detail in that legal description of a patent is that a patent is not all-encompassing of what it discussed in the patent. Not every aspect described is going to be protected. It's the claimed invention that is protected. We're going to talk about claims here in a little bit, but that's a special part of the patent which is dedicated to defining the invention, and it determines the coverage of the patent. Claims list different elements and represent the essence of your legal protection. While other sections of the patent also describe the invention, they also often discuss other details. It is the claims section that determines what a patent protects. To obtain a utility patent, certain requirements must be met. An invention must be useful, novel, and non-obvious. Furthermore, utility patents apply to specific categories such as processes, articles of manufacture, or compositions of matter. Abstract ideas, laws of nature, mental processes are not patentable because they fall outside of these categories. Some technology areas, such as software, medical diagnostic methods, genetic engineering, these sometimes do not qualify as patentable subject matter, and so can't be patented. We will explore these requirements more after reviewing the parts of the patent. Now, many of us might have a vague idea of what a patent looks like, right? We imagine those black and white line drawings and their distinctive hash mark shading, and perhaps we've read about a patent in the news, where it is protected and usually it's boiled down to just a few words. Patents, however, are much more about the written content, and will often be 40 to 100 pages of text. Patents, at their heart, are a technical document, but written with a legal angle to try to maximize the protection that can be obtained by the patent. You don't want to just protect one implementation of your inventive insight, but the broad concept that is being employed. And so patents are usually written to describe your invention with varying levels of abstraction. If you look up a patent, you'll see that it is often broken down into different sections. Most patents will include a title, abstract, background section, figures, figure descriptions, and a detailed description section, as well as a claims section. The title is usually quite broad and not too descriptive. The abstract, which in theory is supposed to be a concise description of the invention, often is very general and not that encompassing of what everything a patent covers. After those sections, though, we usually find the background section, which also provides context by discussing what already exists in the field, but not that meaningful for protecting your technology. It's the figures, the detailed description, and the claims that are the most important parts of a patent. It's in these sections where you disclose the details of your invention. Of these, the claims are what matters for understanding what a patent is attempting to protect. To understand why these sections are the most important, let's take a quick detour to talk about the reasons patents exist. The patent system exists because the government wants to motivate people to share their technical knowledge. The thought being that with more technical information being made public, this will, over the long term, serve the public's interest. The government is essentially allowing a trade. By filing a patent disclosing this technical information and know-how, then you may be granted a limited time monopoly. This underlying principle is what motivates a lot of the logic behind how the patent system works. You file an application, and one portion, the figures and detailed description, is there to fulfill the applicant's responsibility of making information more public. The other portion, the claims, are the specific details of what you are wanting to have protected. Now, you are only granted this protection if the claims are found to be novel and non-obvious. In other words, the government only rewards you if the information you provided, and that you are claiming, is actually new information. Now let's take a closer look at these portions, along with an example. Here we have a patent viewed on Google Patents. By the way, Google Patents is a great tool, especially those who are not patent professionals. They do a great job of presenting the information of a patent, and it has one of the more user-friendly search tools that I've found, especially when you're trying to look up a specific patent, or if you just want to do a generalized search. Now, when I review a patent, the figures, description, and the claims are the main sections I review. The figures are usually the most accessible content to get an idea of what a patent is about, so I'll often start there. As you can see, this patent includes a set of figures. The figures will show different embodiments, variations, and details of the invention. When you're preparing your own patent, figures can be really helpful as they can help reinforce the concepts described in the description. You'll also notice that in these figures, there are little numbers. These numbered elements correspond to different components of the invention. You can figure out what they stand for by looking in the detailed description. The next section, if I want to see what a patent covers or what a patent application is trying to cover, then you would look at the claims. The claims have an odd format. They are a numbered list, usually around 20 different claims, though there can be more, there can be fewer. Now, a claim is written in such a way that it tries to describe what has been invented so as to satisfy the novel and non-obviousness requirement, but also being general enough to cover lots of different variations and implementations of options. To satisfy the novelty and non-obviousness requirement at the time of filing, there should be no prior knowledge that taught every single thing in the claim, or that would have made it obvious to the things in the claims. As the person applying for a patent, you want your claim to be as broad and strong as possible. So you're trying to cut out any extra details so that the claims just capture the inventive concept. In practice, you can think of this as boiling down what you've invented to 3 to 5 main bullet points, introducing the main elements or adding description of those elements. In this example, we see claim 1 has 5 main points and is about the length of a paragraph, which is pretty typical for a first claim. You may notice that in Google Patents, there are some claims that are darker and some that are grayed out slightly. In these claims, there will be at least one claim that will not refer to another claim. This is called an independent claim. These will start with something like a system comprising elements A, B, and C. This first claim here is an independent claim. There will be other claims that will include a reference to another claim. These are called dependent claims because they depend on the details of other claims. These will say something like the system of claim 1 further comprising elements XYZ. This distinction is helpful to understand because the independent claims define the patent's broadest scope of protection. On the other hand, dependent claims are adding more detail, so that means they are actually more narrow in the scope of protection. Google conveniently will try to show these independent claims in a dark font and dependent claims in a lighter gray font. These claims will determine patentability and infringement. As I mentioned, these are different assessments. For claims to be issued, the Patent Office needs to be convinced that no piece of prior art, which could be a patent or another publication, that there could be no prior art that predates the patent application, which discloses each of the details and also the body of the prior art, would not have made it obvious to do all those details. The claims and the application have some other requirements, but convincing the examiner that the claims are novel and non-obvious is usually the main hurdle. The claims are also where you go for assessing infringement and freedom to operate. For these, you are not looking at your own patent, but the patent of others. Now, infringement analysis can be a fairly complex analysis, so it is something you should work with legal counsel on. However, the general principle is that if you do each and everything listed in at least one claim of a patent, then you may infringe that patent. Another way to phrase this is if someone does not do even one thing in an independent claim, then they don't infringe the patent. While the claims define the legal protection, the detailed description section serves to support these claims. As mentioned, a patent is all about that trade. You give up technical knowledge and know-how in exchange for the patent protection. The detailed description section can often get pretty long. It's not uncommon for this section to be 50 to 100 pages of content. The detailed description has to describe everything that is claimed. It will also usually describe lots of other additional detail. Here, it's just a small portion highlighted, but that's because it runs on and on describing the invention and supporting details of the invention. In some cases, the application may in fact cover multiple inventions or alternative descriptions of the same invention multiple times from different perspectives. In the detailed description, and in the claims for that matter, you are usually trying to describe your invention at different levels of abstraction. You want to provide the most general description you can, but then you want to describe each element in more and more detail. You usually will stop when there's details become trivial and you're getting into the non-inventive aspects. For example, you would not describe each measurement in small detail in a CAD drawing of a product, but you may describe the fundamental properties and details of each component and how those components work together. The important aspect of this description section is that this cannot be changed after you file your application. Your claims, however, can be adjusted and changed as long as they are supported by your detailed description. That is one of the reasons you write your invention with different levels of abstraction. You want to describe your invention as broadly as possible to possibly get you this broad protection, but you want more detailed descriptions of this concept so that you can adjust the claims to be more detailed if that's what's required to get the patent through the patent office. One way you could think about the detailed description is that it serves as a supply of technical ideas. It's your arsenal of words that can be used to adjust the claims and the details that can be used in the claims. At the end of the patent process, the claims are the most important part of an issued patent because that is what defines your protection. However, in many ways, the detailed description is the most important part for you to focus on when you're working on preparing your application. The reason for this is you are allowed to claim anything that is described in your description. However, you are not allowed to change that description once it's filed. This all goes back to the reasons of the patent system exists, that trade of knowledge for protection. Now let's address an important point. Not all patent applications are granted. Each patent application starts out as just that, an application. You can say patent pending once it's filed, but there is no legal protection until it is granted. So what makes an invention? How does a patent application become a patent? After you prepare and file your patent application, the Patent Office will eventually have some person called an examiner review the application, do a search of the prior art, and then decide if the application qualifies. The main barrier to getting a patent is convincing the Patent Office, this examiner, that your claims satisfy the requirements of a patent. This examination stage of the patent process will often involve rounds of arguments and adjustments that your patent representation can make with the Patent Office. This happens until the claims are found to be patentable or potentially ultimately rejected and abandoned, but hopefully your patent's allowed. The two primary requirements would be that the claims must claim an invention that is novel and non-obvious. These two main requirements are assessed based on the prior art, as we've mentioned. Prior art is the term the Patent Office uses to describe any information predating the filing of your application. Prior art can include other patents, patent applications, papers, websites, or any publicly available information that predates when you filed your application. Any prior art that is found to be teaching one or more details of your claims may be used to reject the application and to argue why the claims are not novel or why they're obvious. The other two main requirements would be that the claims are useful and patent eligible. The useful requirement is a pretty easy one to satisfy and isn't a problem for most people. If you're building a company where people are paying money for your technology, then it likely qualifies. Patent eligibility can be a challenge for certain types of technology, like those relating to software, medical diagnostic methods, and genetic engineering, which we've mentioned before. It's there to prevent people from obtaining patent protection on things like laws of nature, math, abstract ideas, or processes performed by humans. The patent system has the eligibility rule because they want the patent system to be for protecting technology and something tangible. With so much knowledge in the world, it can be hard for those new to patents to understand what the patent system would view as novel and non-obvious. There are several patterns of types of concepts that lend themselves to satisfying this novelty and non-obviousness requirement. One pattern for an invention is by improving a specific component. For example, let's say we have a wind turbine. If we develop a blade design with a unique geometry that solves a specific problem, such as increasing efficiency or reducing noise, we could potentially obtain a patent. By introducing a new and unexplored element to that design, we're differentiating our innovation from existing ones in the market. Another pattern of inventions involves merging two different fields in some novel way. By combining well-known technologies from wave energy generators and solar cells, for instance, maybe you can create a hybrid system that offers some distinct advantage that wasn't previously in either of those use cases. However, it's crucial to ensure that the combination brings tangible benefits and doesn't merely present the idea of doing two things at the same time. Another invention pattern is adapting old legacy technology. This one can be a little bit surprising and sometimes also challenging to protect, but I've seen this pattern happen many times. How it usually occurs is that there has been some technology or some knowledge that's well established. It may have been researched 30 or even 50 years ago. Or maybe there is some product that has been on the market but just unchanged for 20, 30 years. Since there has been a lot of changes in technology since 20 or 30 years ago, there are many ways in which this technology may be updated and made patentable. For example, new manufacturing techniques or new sensing technology, when you apply it to this old technology, maybe it creates a new and inventive concept. Another pattern is taking technology from one field and moving it to a new one. Doing this can sometimes lead to technology that, when described in the context of how it's adapted and updated for this new field, can be protected. This variety can be challenging as well, as the Patent Office may consider it obvious if it's just a straightforward application of an existing technology somewhere else. To overcome this, though, you usually have to really focus on identifying the unique challenges specific to that new field and how this technology from somewhere else is being adapted in that new field. My last example of a type of invention is probably the one most people think of when they think of a patent. An invention where you came up with a concept radically different, some new approach to something. These types of patents, in my experience, are pretty rare though. These obviously can be very protectable, but you shouldn't use this pattern as the threshold for getting a patent. As described above, there's many other ways in which incremental improvements and remixing of ideas can also be found patentable. We've discussed what a patent is, the protection it provides, the parts of the patent, and the qualities that can make something patentable. I want to shift for a moment to discuss how you should think about them from the perspective of a founder, someone building a company. You know what they are, why should you care? The motivation people will often initially have is that patents allow you to prevent others from copying your ideas. While patents do provide a means to stop others from doing the claimed invention, the reality is that enforcing these patents can be incredibly expensive. Pursuing litigation against large corporations can become prohibitively expensive. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and more likely in the millions to litigate your patent. So while preventing copies remains a possible goal, it may not always be the most feasible option for a small startup. This is not the best reason for pursuing a patent. Another potential motivation revolves around an ability to make money from patents themselves through licensing or IP sales. Licensing of patents can be a way to make money in some industries. Some businesses can be very successful using this approach. However, if you are a VC-funded startup, licensing is probably not a revenue model that you would be relying on, and possibly a distraction. The other downside is it takes time to build up a high-value patent portfolio to make licensing a viable source of revenue. So what would be compelling reasons? How can patents in the short term meaningfully impact the success of my company? First, your patents can be a signal to investors. It shows that you are being diligent in securing legal protection for the technology that they are investing in. Not having a patent portfolio or the portfolio not being as strong as expected can be a red flag to investors. Diligently working on building your patent portfolio can avoid these situations. The next reason, patents can be hugely valuable when engaging in strategic partnerships, especially when there is a collaboration on some technology. This scenario comes up very often for startups. Collaboration can potentially blur the lines of ownership and attribution, causing disputes over intellectual property. By filing patents before entering into technical discussions, you can establish a clear and enforceable position, mitigating potential conflicts over ownership and credit for an invention. Another more long-term view is that building your patent portfolio now can result in higher value once your company reaches some level of success, like after an exit event. Patents can be very valuable to an acquirer, and if you become a public company, then you are usually in a position where you do have the option to enforce your patent portfolio. Another good reason is that building a patent portfolio can serve as a defensive deterrent for other competitors who may otherwise use their patent portfolio against you. As one note, some people believe that obtaining a patent will protect them from infringing other people's intellectual property. Unfortunately, this is not how patents work. Merely having a patent doesn't guarantee a freedom from infringement. So now you understand how patents may benefit your company, and you're ready to get started. How do you do that? How do you build a patent portfolio? If you have one concept that seems patentable, that makes it easy. There's just that one idea you need to protect. But for many companies, there are multiple aspects that seem inventive. Or as the technology evolves, there will be different ideas that may benefit from protecting. In many tech companies, I see the number of potentially patentable concepts often being more than the resources for protecting them. So I'm a big advocate of trying to build a minimally viable portfolio. You want to build a patent portfolio that at its foundation is strong, but that is streamlined so that you can minimize costs and save time. Every company is different, and so giving universal strategy advice can be really challenging. But here are a few points for you to consider and to set as goals for your portfolio. First, you should feel comfortable making the size of your portfolio scale with where you are as a company. Most companies start out with their patent portfolio starting with just 1 to maybe 3 patent filings. And then as they grow as a company, they can expand their patent filings. Second, how you pitch your company can be very useful in guiding where you focus your patent protection. If your company pitch says that your company is different because of X, Y, and Z, then you should start building your patent portfolio so that it covers how you enable X, Y, and Z. As another tip, you will want to prioritize high-value filings. This means your detailed descriptions should be as strong as possible. Unlike large companies that have much higher filing volume, smaller companies have a lot riding on each individual filing. And so you want your patent team putting in the effort to make your application as strong as possible when preparing your application draft. As we mentioned, once your application is filed, you can't change the detailed description or figures. Last, I'd say just be thoughtful about building your portfolio. This concept is captured by some of the other suggestions above, but I think it also speaks to being patient in building your portfolio and not neglecting it. For example, after filing a patent application, you'll possibly have to wait 2 years before anything happens. It can be helpful to periodically meet with your patent team and just to check in with where you're at. Great. So we have what a patent is, why you may care, and how, at a high level, you may want to think about building a patent portfolio within your company. But what does that actually mean? How do you actually get a patent? One path that I think works well for most startups is the one presented here. It's a simple process that gives you a lot of flexibility for situations that commonly happen with startups. In this sample process, you start with a provisional, and then within 1 year, you file the full final application, which in the patent world is somewhat confusingly called a non-provisional application. The non-provisional is what will put your application in line to be examined by the patent office. And so at some point, usually 1 to 2 years after filing that non-provisional, you'll get your first letter from the patent office called an office action, which is when you start your examination stage. An office action is the examination results of your patent application. You can have any number of these office actions, but the USPTO averages around 2 to 3 rounds of office actions. Lastly, if you're successful, you will get your patent allowed and it will be issued a patent number. That is when your patent can actually be enforced. There are several other options for how you could build out your patent portfolio. 2 additional options in the process that you should at least be somewhat familiar with or recognize their names would be continuations and foreign filing options. The first option, a continuation, is an option that usually comes up later in the process. A continuation is like a child application that has the same description, gets the same priority date, but has different sets of claims. This continuation goes through the same examination process and can turn into its own patent with its own patent number. If you think back to what we discussed earlier about why the government has the patent system at all, this makes a lot of sense. The government has set up the patent system so that it can reward inventors that disclose their invention. There are multiple claimable inventions that have been described in an application, then the government is willing to grant patent protection of those ideas. The one rule around a continuation is that it must be filed while another patent family member is pending. In other words, you have to file a continuation before the parent application has been issued. It can be a common pattern to chain these continuations, filing a continuation once a patent is allowed before it issues. Continuations can be a great way for startups to increase their patent portfolio and to also sometimes defer out costs to when a company is more established. A patent's foreign filing options is another option that you should be aware of. Patents are only enforceable within the country or region in which they are issued. There's no such thing as an international patent that protects you all over the world. When it makes sense to pursue international protection, one great way to do so is to file what is called a PCT application. Different contracting states or countries allow you to use the PCT to enter a patent application into their country, but you can do so later on in the process. Effectively, the PCT allows you to preserve the option for filing in different foreign regions, but to do so later. You must file a PCT application within 1 year of the earliest priority date. This will buy you time to decide which countries, if any, to enter the patent application into. Most countries or regions give you either 30 months or 31 months, but every country kind of has their own timing. Once entered into a country, an application will go through its own examination process to become a patent in that country. One possible filing approach is to file a PCT in parallel or in place of the US non-provisional. If you file the PCT alongside a US, this starts the US process, but it also allows you to delay when you have to file the different national stage patent applications for other countries outside of the US. This can be particularly useful for startups when the financial state of the company can be very different when you would be entering the patent into other countries. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about why the patent system exists. We've explored what a patent, specifically a utility patent, what it is, and its different parts. We've touched on some of the good motivators for building a patent portfolio and how to do that. And finally, we looked at the steps and the process of getting a patent. Patents can be an intimidating field. It mixes understanding and evaluating technology, navigating a legal system, and considering the business strategy behind it. As a process, it is also not very straightforward, and there are many options and trade-offs that will have to be made along the way. We've touched on several of these main topics so that you can have a better handle of building your patent portfolio.